buddycarter.house.gov. And you can sign up for that. You can also connect with me on social media at rep, R-E-P, at Rep Buddy Carter on Instagram and X, and at Congressman Buddy Carter on Facebook. You can do that. If you need help with any government agency, whether it be the IRS, whether it be passports, it doesn't matter. Please reach out to our office. That's what we're there for. We're here to serve you. You know, I tell people all the time, I didn't have the honor and privilege of serving in our military. This is my opportunity to serve, and it's to serve you and to serve our veterans and to serve our active military. So if you need help, please reach out to our offices. Our Savannah office is 912-352-0101, 352-0101. Our Brunswick office is 265-9010, 265-9010. Also, you can get contact information on our webpage, buddycarter.house.gov, buddycarter.house.gov. Now, let's talk about the big, beautiful bill act that was passed last week and signed into law by the president on July 4th. Folks, I don't think y'all realize, but if we had not passed this bill, and maybe you do realize, I apologize, I don't mean to include everyone in this, but a lot of people don't realize that if we did not pass this bill, Americans would have seen the highest tax increase ever. Georgians, 88% of Georgians would have seen a tax increase of almost $1,500 a year. Now, you know, I don't know about y'all, but who can afford to give the government $1,500 a year more? I mean, that's the equivalent of about 7 weeks worth of groceries for one person. And that would have an ill impact, an awful impact on our economy. We cannot afford to let that happen. But the one big beautiful bill made the tax cuts that were part of the first administration, the first Trump administration, they made them permanent. So those tax cuts are in here now. Remember, President Trump campaigned on no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime, cutting taxes on Social Security. He did all that through this one big, beautiful bill. We passed all this, but this is going to result in bigger paychecks. What about the child tax credit? The child tax credit, consider it doubled. That's right. The child tax credit was doubled. I mean, how significant is that? That is significant. We eliminated waste, fraud, and abuse. We got more money in for border security, which is so vitally important. All of us understand how important it is for a number of different reasons, not only to keep illegals from coming across that border, but to stop the flow of illegal drugs that are infesting all of our communities. And it's infesting the fentanyl that is poisoning our people. That's what this is going to do. It's very important. Provides for our national defense, ensures our warfighters are the strongest and best equipped in the nation, and we have the greatest military ever, and we have to continue to make sure that they are financed, and we have done that. We've got funds for the Golden Dome missile defense system. Many of you are familiar with Israel and their Golden Dome that's worked so well. Now we're going to have one in America that's going to protect us from our adversaries like China, North America, Iran, those countries that want to hurt us. Also, this is one of the most consequential pieces of legislation that I've ever voted on. I would say that it's the most consequential. In fact, our speaker referred to it as one of the most consequential 2 or 3 bills that we've ever passed, ever, out of the House of Representatives. That's a lot of bills that have been passed, a lot of important historic stuff, but this one was most consequential. And this president, I would submit to you, in the first 6 months of his second term, has been the most consequential president that we've ever had. Now, we're ready to take questions, and again, I'm looking forward to this, and I want to get as many questions as we can in. So, Harley, if you're ready, I'm ready to start answering.
Hey, we have a question from Leslie K, who says, why does Congress continue to cede its power as a co-equal branch to the executive branch?
Well, that's a good question. And you know, that's a question for Congress, Republicans and Democrats, because I couldn't agree with you more. We have we have conceded our authority to the executive branch, regardless of whether you're a Democrat or Republican. If you're a member of Congress, you ought to be concerned about this. And I will tell you, members of Congress are concerned about it because we understand that for the past 4 years of the Biden-Harris administration, and even now, so much is being done by executive order when it should be done by the people's house, by Congress. We're elected to represent you. And we need, that's not Republicans' fault, it's not Democrats' fault, it's both of our faults. Over the years, and I'm talking about over a period of decades, 2 or 3 decades, we've conceded too much authority to the executive branch. Our forefathers didn't intend for that to be the case. They wanted us to be evenly powerful. They wanted the legislative branch, they wanted the executive branch and the judicial branch to all be checks and balances on each other. Well, that has changed, and we have let the executive branch take too much and take too much power, and we conceded it to them through Congress, and we've let that happen. Both Democrats and Republicans. I don't care if it's a Republican president or a Democratic. Well, I do, but I mean, regardless, Congress should reassert ourselves and reassert our authority. That is a great question, and I think as time goes on, you'll see us trying to do just that, trying to get back more of our authority.
Barbara S. asks, what specifically have you accomplished to improve the lives of your constituents this year?
The One Big Beautiful Bill Act. I mean, this year, since the start of the session, we've saved taxpayers money. We've saved taxpayers money. We've secured our border. Did you know that since the Trump administration started, that there are 96% less apprehensions at the border than there were before? I mean, let's face it, during the Biden-Harris administration, we had an open border. People were flowing across there. Now we've got a border that's secure, and that's so vitally important. Obviously, from the number of people who are coming here, and look, don't think for 1 minute, none of us are naive enough to believe that there weren't people coming across that border with the intent of hurting us. I mean, there were people, it wasn't just people from Mexico coming or from Central America. There were people coming from other countries as well. And I'm sure they're still here, people who have an intent to hurt us. And that's why we needed to secure that border. And I'm very proud we secured that border. We also, in the Big Beautiful Bill Act, we made sure that we're going to have energy dominance, making sure that, as I believe, that we should have an all of the above type energy strategy. And we're trying to achieve that. And that's very important as well. So through the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, we've achieved quite a bit. Trust me, there was a lot in that bill, a lot of good things.
Christy D asks, why do you support cutting assistance for the poorest among us?
I'm really sorry, Christy, that the Democrats have lied to you, because that's simply not true. How do I know? Because I was chair of the Health Subcommittee of Energy and Commerce. Our subcommittee saved $800 billion out of the $1.5 billion that was saved in the One Big Beautiful Act. Over half of it came from our subcommittee. And how did we do it? We did it by making Medicaid better. We didn't cut anyone off of Medicaid. What we said with the Medicaid program, and keep in mind, the Medicaid program is a safety net program. It's for the most vulnerable in our society, for the aged, blind, disabled, for mothers, for children. It's for people who truly need help. And we made sure that that's going to be the case. How did we do it? We eliminated waste, fraud, and abuse. We eliminated it. We also made sure that illegals are not going to be on it. Now, let me tell you, John Ossoff voted against an amendment that was offered by Senator Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee that would have said no illegals are going to be on Medicaid. John Ossoff wants your Medicaid money in the state of Georgia to go to illegals. John Ossoff wants your Medicaid money in the state of Georgia to go to illegals. No, that is for Americans. That is for the most vulnerable in our society. We made sure that that states cannot have illegals on Medicaid. And don't think for 1 minute that they weren't doing it. California, Illinois, New York, all of them were doing it. And they were saying, oh, well, we're using state funds. We're not using federal funds. Yeah, you're using federal funds to replace those state funds that you were using. Come on, man. I was born at night, but it wasn't last night. You're not fooling me. That's no longer the case. We got illegals off of it. We did away with waste, fraud, and abuse. We got ineligibles off of it. The Biden-Harris administration, they weren't even checking the rolls. Once you got on Medicaid, you could stay as long as you wanted. Didn't matter if you got a job and started making more. They just let you stay on it. Well, we said to the states, you need to be checking every 6 months. If they're not eligible, they need to come off of it and go on to something else. There are other insurance programs out there that you can go on, but you don't need to be on the safety net program that's intended for the most vulnerable in our society. The last thing we did in order to save money was that we said, hey, if you're able-bodied, that is, if you're taking care of a child, taking care of a parent, or if you're disabled, okay, you're exempt. But if you're able-bodied sitting on the couch, you got to at least work 20 hours a week or volunteer 20 hours a week. Work requirements for people on Medicaid. You ought to have to do that. We want to make sure that people are lifted up and get the opportunity to move into other programs. Did you know there's a waiting list on Medicaid? That's right, there's a waiting list on Medicaid. There are people who are waiting to get on Medicaid, a safety net program. We need to make sure they can get on there. So did we cut Medicaid? No. I was chair of that subcommittee at that time. I've resigned since then because I'm running for the Senate, but I promised them I would get us through the reconciliation process, and I did that. And I made sure that we weren't kicking anybody off. I made sure that we were getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse, that we're getting rid of illegals, eligibles, and that we were having work requirements. We saved $800 billion that way. So don't buy into this rhetoric and these lies that the Democrats are throwing at you, saying that, oh, you kick people off Medicaid. No, we did not.
Deborah C. asks, name 5 significant pieces of legislation that you believe all District 1 constituents have benefited from.
Well, number 1 is the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Hey, you saving taxpayer money? That's one that we did. We had others too, the Lake and Raleigh Act. That was a very important piece of legislation to make sure. You know what happened at our flagship university, at the University of Georgia, the Lake and Raleigh Act? That was a very important piece of legislation. I'm very proud to have co-sponsored it. The Halt Fentanyl Act. I mentioned earlier about our border and how it needed to be secured, not only to stop people and illegals who were coming across that border, but also to make sure that we were stopping the flow of that fentanyl that's poisoning our citizens. We had the Halt Fentanyl Act. That really helped. It made sure that fentanyl was classified as a Schedule I drug so that people who are caught with it, they have to suffer the ramifications and the laws of having a Class I drug when they're not supposed to. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that we passed in 2017, the precursor, if you will, to the One Big Beautiful Bill. The difference is the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that was passed in the first Trump administration, the tax cuts weren't made permanent. We made them permanent in the One Big Beautiful Bill. So that was very important. So those are examples of what we've done. Probably another one that I personally feel like is very important, and this is save taxpayers money. If you buy drugs, it saves you money. You know, I practiced pharmacy for many years, for 40 years. I started when I was 10. But anyway, I practiced pharmacy for many years. And did you know that there was a time when insurance companies would tell pharmacists, okay, if you're going to accept this contract for these people who are on this program, you cannot tell them if they pay cash for this, that it'd be lower than their copay. It was called a gag clause. And if I told them that, then I'd get kicked out of the network. I passed legislation that did away with that. The gag clause act. It said that no, the pharmacist can tell you that, hey, you're paying $15 copay. Hey, you can buy this for $4 if you just pay cash for it. And I don't even pay you your copay. So pharmacists do that now. It saves you money. And we're getting more legislation that's going to save you money. I I have made as one of my primary goals to bring the prescription drug prices down, and we're doing just that.
Susan M. asks, what are you doing to protect people who depend on Medicaid for healthcare, nursing home care, and prescriptions?
We're saving it, we're securing it, we're sustaining it. All those things that I just mentioned a minute ago about making sure illegals aren't on it. Although John Ossoff wants you to have illegals on it. How in the world can you vote for that? How in the world can you vote to have illegals on a program that was intended for the most vulnerable Americans? Well, he did. He wants you to have illegals. We made sure illegals aren't there. If you're ineligible, you need to come off of it. We got people waiting to get on it. If you're not eligible to be on there, you need to come off of it. Work requirements, making sure if you're sitting on the couch, if you're perfectly able, you need to be working, and you need to at least be volunteering 20 hours a week. We made sure that, and we eliminated waste, fraud, and abuse. So what did we do with Medicaid? And you're going to hear all the Dems hollering, "Oh, you kick people off of Medicaid." No, we did not. What we did was we made the program even better for those who truly deserve it and who truly need it.
Keeping with the theme of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, Rita B asks, how will the BBB affect hospitals and healthcare in rural Georgia?
That's a good question. As we say in Georgia, there are really two Georgias. There's Atlanta and everywhere else. And a lot of everywhere else is in our district. And we have a lot of rural hospitals, and we need to keep them going. They need to. We made sure in the Senate, and give credit where credit's due, the Senate added in $50 billion for rural hospitals. That's significant. That's going to help them. It will make it'll make rural healthcare even better. We're also getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse, and that's very important as well. We need to get rid of it. It's just killing our system right now.
Joy K asks, what are you doing to protect the thousands of jobs in Georgia's solar energy and automotive sector?
Well, that's a good question. As you know, we have the single largest economic development project in the history of our state, right in the first district in Bryan County, in North Bryan County. The Hyundai plant, a $7.6 billion investment that's going to result in 8,500 jobs, probably that many more jobs in ancillary businesses, probably that much more of an investment in ancillary businesses. We are blessed to have them and thankful to have them. Those are good paying jobs too. And if you're one of the ones working out there, you can appreciate that. I'm one who believes that we have to have an all of the above type energy strategy. Now, I will tell you, first of all, let's keep in mind that the IRA, which was the Democrats' signature legislation during the 4 years of the Biden-Harris administration, that the decision to build the Hyundai plant was made before the IRA passed. Now, of course, there are some parts of the IRA that and some tax breaks that Hyundai would like to have, as any company would like to have. I'm sure there are, but they made that decision to build that plant before the IRA. Now, they made a wise decision, because I tell you, they're going to do great. Because there's going to be a market for EVs. I'm not arguing that. What I'm saying is that I don't think it's the place of the government to step in and say, you got to drive this kind of car. You got to drive that kind of car. Let the market decide what kind of car that people are going to get. There are going to be people who want EVs, particularly in urban areas. They're going to want EVs. And there's going to be, and Hyundai's going to do great. They are going to be so pleased that they made this decision. I assure you of that. But I do not think it's right for the government to step in and say, you got to buy this kind of car. You can't use this kind of appliance. The Biden-Harris administration didn't want you using natural gas, didn't want you cooking with natural gas. How ludicrous is that? Don't tell me I got to cook with electric. I can't cook with natural gas. That's not the role of government to tell you that. So I feel very strongly in that. The state of Georgia has done a great job, and I compliment our former governors and our current governor, Brian Kemp, who I think has done an outstanding job with making sure that Georgia is business friendly. For 11 years in a row, Georgia has been the number one state in which to do business. That's because of the leadership that we've had. That's because of Nathan Deal, of Sonny Perdue, of Brian Kemp. We've been very blessed to have great governors, and they've done a great job of creating that business community. So all of that's very important, and all of that has added to this. But again, let me say that I believe in all of the above type energy strategy because we're going to need every electron we can get. When you start talking about AI, when you start talking about data centers, we're going to need electricity. We're going to need every electron we can get. We all understand that, and that's why we should be using all of it.
From Amy A, what legislation is next for MAGA?
Well, good question, because quite honestly, the first 6 months of this administration, of this session, have been all about the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Well, I mean, it's sucked up all the oxygen out of the room. But now we can start working on some other things. Rescissions. What's a rescission? That's when you go back and money that was originally appropriated for a program, you can rescind it and bring it back. And that's what we're doing right now. We've already passed a $9.4 billion rescission package, and that was very important. We also are going to get back to regular order. We're doing our best to do that, pass our appropriation bills. Keep in mind now, this reconciliation bill, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, we can do another reconciliation bill. And I would submit to you, we need to do another reconciliation bill. What do we need to do it for? In my opinion, we need to do it for deficit reduction. Right now, $36 trillion in debt. We need to do something about that debt. And we can do a reconciliation bill to address deficit reduction. And I think that's what we ought to be doing.
Returning to the One Big Beautiful Bill, Larry N asks, why did you vote in favor of many of your constituents losing Medicaid health care so billionaires can pay less in taxes?
Larry, I'm sorry that you've been lied to, but you have. You've been lied to by the Democrats, by the liberals, because as I explained earlier, we made Medicaid better. We made it a better program. We saved it. We sustained it. We stabilized it. We made it better for those who truly need it, the most vulnerable in our society. I worked, as I say, and as you know, I was a pharmacist for many years, and I filled a lot of prescriptions for people on Medicaid. And I can tell you, almost all of them that I filled those prescriptions for, they needed it. They needed that help. And I get it. I know that. But at the same time, there was a lot of waste, a lot of fraud, a lot of abuse. And that's what we cut out. And there were a lot of people who shouldn't have been on it either. We cut that out. We're going to make sure no illegals, no ineligibles, work requirements, get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse, all of that stuff in order to protect the most vulnerable in our society.
Carter H asks, what's the next step now that the OBBBA is passed?
Well, the next step is really to implement what we're doing, to make sure we're securing the border and to use those funds that were appropriated for it to secure the border. Make sure that we're having energy dominance, to use the money that was appropriated to go to secure our border, to do that, to build the wall, to do that, but also the energy dominance to make sure that the policies that were in there that are going to lead to more energy dominance, that they're followed through with. We need to make sure we're doing all of those things. This is going to help our economy so much and you've seen what it's done. The stock market's gone crazy since the bill was passed. And thank goodness for that, because this protects our economy. It keeps our economy growing. And we need that. We need to grow our economy.
From Michael R, what is Congress doing to secure the southern border?
Well, as we said, we're doing the One Big Beautiful Bill Act has the money in it for securing the border, and that's very important. And by the way, I would be remiss if I did not offer condolences for the and concern for Border Patrol agents who were attacked in McAllen. I've been to the border 8 times in the 10.5 years I've been in Congress, and many of those times I went to McAllen. Probably out of the 8 times, 6 out of the 8 times I went to McAllen. It's the southernmost part of the Rio Grande Valley sector of the border, and McAllen's where a lot of people go, and of course there was an attack on some of our border patrol agents down there, and certainly they're in our thoughts and prayers. But that money is going to go toward them to securing the border. That's going to be very important. We need to support our ICE agents. There's no question about that. They need our support, and we'll continue to do that. And that's really about what we're doing. And again, there are other things that we can do to address the fentanyl poisoning and the fentanyl crisis that we have in this country. I want to tell you about one of the things that we were able to do that I was directly involved in. In fact, I was the one who called on the DEA to make naloxone available without a prescription. Naloxone, of course, is a drug that reverses the effects of fentanyl. And you can now buy naloxone, a nasal spray, without a prescription. It saved many, many lives, and that's very important. And that's another way that we've really addressed the fentanyl poisoning that's going in, the fentanyl crisis in our country.
Mary W. wants to know, do you have any plans to restore funding for the National Weather Service, NOAA, and FEMA after what happened in Texas with the needless loss of life?
Look, the National Weather Service did not take any cuts. And if you listen to the union of the National Weather Service, they tell you that there weren't any cuts, and that didn't impact what happened in McAllen, or excuse me, at Camp Mystic, where my granddaughters were. That didn't have anything to do with it. Look, this was now look, we need to review this. There's no question about that. Anytime you have a tragedy like this, you need to review what happened. What could we have done better? What could we done differently? What would have worked better? That's shame on you if you don't do that. You should do that. But is that thunder? Wow. But I will tell you this. Look, my granddaughters were there. Now I've talked to my son, and I know what happened. I know what they're telling us. This happened in the middle of the night. First of all, it happened in the middle of the night. There were warnings. There were warnings at 1 o'clock and at 4 o'clock. That water, 26 feet, rose in 45 minutes. Think about that. 26 feet in 45 minutes. That's not a lot of time to get out of somewhere. And God bless those people. And the first responders, the federal agents, the state agents, everyone who was involved in that did such an outstanding job. And I especially want to thank Scott Rossman, who was a Coast Guard swimmer who rescued my granddaughters along with 163 other people and other kids. He got my granddaughters on the helicopter. He comforted them, made sure they were taken to higher ground and made sure they were safe. I'll always be grateful for him for that. And all the people who are out there still working with the slim hope that someone might still be alive, trying to recover bodies. The death toll is over 100 now. But I will tell you that yeah, there were systems in place, and yeah, I'm sure we can do better than and learn from some of the things that happened during that time. But to start pointing fingers and to start blaming people, I don't think that's the thing to do right now. I can't explain, I can't put into words what our family's going through right now, what my son's family and my daughter-in-law's family's going through. The other night, Sunday night, I called President Trump, and I asked him if he would call the parents of Janie Hunt, and he did that for me. And they were so grateful that President Trump took time out to call them and to console them. I wish that y'all knew him the way I know him. He's one of the most sincere people I've ever met in my life. And I will tell you that he has made sure that as much federal funds, all available federal funds and federal assets are going down there. In the state, I just can't tell you how great a job they did. Whenever I got notified of this, I was in a parade up in North Georgia in Forsyth County in Cumming, Georgia. And my son called me about 10:30, and as you can imagine, he was hysterical. And he told me what had happened. And for about 8 or 10 hours, we didn't know. We didn't know if our granddaughters were okay. My son was trying to get there, live in Charlottesville, Virginia, and they were trying to get down to Dallas and then over to Kerrville and to Camp Mystic. And just as they got down to Richmond, Virginia to go to the airport, and as they were flying out, my daughter-in-law got a call from her sister-in-law who said that our granddaughters were okay, but that Janie was still missing. I tell you again, yeah, we need to review this. There's no question about that. But pointing fingers and trying to put blame on people, that's not going to do any good.
Frank C. wants to know, what are you doing about the high cost of prescription drugs?
Thank you for asking. I practiced pharmacy, as I said, for over 40 years, and I was the one who had to go to the counter and tell the senior citizen how much their prescription was. I was the one who had to watch them make a decision between buying groceries and buying their medicine. I was the one who had to go to the counter and tell the mother how much her antibiotic for their child was. I was the one who watched her in tears as she tried to figure out how she was going to pay for that antibiotic. I set as my mission, as my goal, to do something about that. And we are doing everything we can to bring prescription drug prices down. We came this close to having PBM, pharmacy benefit managers. Those are the middleman. Most of them are owned by the insurance companies. And those are the ones who are causing prescription drug prices to go up. Right now, I'm in a friend of mine's office in his pharmacy, Dean Stone in Metter, Georgia. That's where I am right now. Dean was kind enough to let us use this office on our way from Atlanta back to St. Simon's. And I can tell you, pharmacy benefit managers, they're what's causing, the middlemen are causing prices to go up. So we're trying to do something about it, and we are going to do something about it. I told you earlier about the gag clause where I couldn't tell you if your copay was, if you paid cash, it was cheaper than your copay. How ridiculous is that? We did away with that. We've got legislation that we're introducing right now. We came this close to getting it passed out of the CR back in December. Unfortunately, it got pulled, but we're reintroducing that in a bipartisan fashion. Hey, I never went to the counter and asked somebody if they were a Republican or Democrat. All I knew is their prescription was high. And that it has nothing to do with it. It's not partisan at all. It's high for everybody. That's why we got to do something about it, and that's why we are doing something about it. We're going to make sure that these PBMs come under control, and we're going to get them under control, and we're going to get your drug prices down.
In keeping with the theme of PBMs, Bridget S. wants to know, how close are we to PBM reform?
Very close. As I mentioned, we came that close in December with the CR. We had it. And then the rug got pulled out from underneath our feet. But this time, I'm sponsoring the bill. I'm the lead sponsor. The lead co-sponsor is a Democrat, Jake Auchinclosh from Boston, Massachusetts. Now, Jake and I politically are about as opposite as you can be, but we come together. We come together when it comes to prescription drugs, and we come together when it comes to healthcare. After all, look, we all want the same thing in healthcare. Whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, or independent, you want affordable, accessible, quality healthcare. That's what we want. That's what I want. That's what Jake wants. That's what Debbie Dingell, another Democrat, wants. That's what the Republicans want. It's what the Democrats want. That's what we work together on, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to make sure that we have affordable, accessible, quality health care for everyone.
Grant S. asks, what is your take on Doge?
Look, I applaud Elon Musk for the work that he did with the Department of Government Efficiency. He identified a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse using 21st century technology. We're using an antiquated system to double check things. Well, he used 21st century technology to check things, and he found a lot of fraud and waste and abuse, and we need to do that. Now, I'm a member of the Doge caucus in Congress. And we are going to work. We're not dropping it just because Elon's out of the picture now. We're going to continue. We're going to continue to look for waste, fraud, and abuse. When you have such a bloated bureaucracy, you know you're going to have a lot of waste. And look at what we identified. I mean, a group that was affiliated with Stacey Abrams that had never gotten more than a $100,000. All of a sudden, they get $2 billion. What's that about? That's not right. That's the kind of fraud that we need to be identifying. We had the waste of, all this money that was going toward all these ridiculous programs in South America for comic books, for LGBTQ. I mean, what's that about? We shouldn't be spending taxpayers' money on that. Yeah, there's a lot of good things out there that we do that America does, but when you get as big as the government has gotten, this bureaucracy has gotten, there's a lot of waste.
Returning to the one big beautiful bill, JPS asks, how do you reconcile saying you're proud of the bill for delivering tax relief and Social Security while it adds an estimated 3.3 trillion to the federal debt?
Thank you for that question, because I want to address that. First of all, I disagree with the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office. Who is that? The Congressional Budget Office are economists. Good people. I'm not saying they're bad people, but they never get it right. They always get it wrong. And they've got this wrong. I would submit to you that we are actually going to decrease our deficit with the one big beautiful bill. What's the big difference? What did they get wrong? They're not factoring in growth. They think that we're going to have a growth. They factored in at 1.8%. The average over the last 20 years has been almost 3%, 2.8%. We factored in 2.8%. At 2.8%, we can actually save on the deficit. So I disagree with that number. I disagree with it adamantly. And again, I'm not arguing the fact that we need to do another reconciliation bill to address deficit reduction. Yes, we do. But at the same time, CBO just did not get this right. They don't want to think about what we refer to as dynamic scoring. That is, looking at growth and the impact that the growth in our economy is going to have. As this bill takes effect and people have more money in their pocket, people aren't going to have to pay taxes on tips. They're not going to have to pay taxes on overtime. More people are going to get more tax relief on Social Security. Not all of it yet, but we're going to work toward that. We're going to continue to work toward that. My good friend, Dwayne Anderson, I want to give him a shout out. I'm working on it, Dwayne. I promise you I am. And we are going to make sure that we get the taxes off of Social Security as soon as we can. They deserve that.
Jamie D wants to know, how do you feel about the recent Supreme Court ruling on birthright citizenship?
Well, that's another good question, and I really feel like the justices made the right call in this instance, and I'm really glad to see. I've been upset with some of the lower court judges that are, especially the rogue lower court judges that are making decisions that I think are out of place. And I'm glad to see the Supreme Court exerting their authority and making some of these decisions. But we shouldn't have these rogue district court judges issuing nationwide injunction. Some rogue judge out of Washington State is going to make a decision that impacts the whole nation. Well, thank you very much, but I don't want that in Georgia. I don't need you to be making decisions that are going to impact my state. But President Trump keeps winning. And I tell you, I think it's a good thing, and I think the justices made a really good decision in this one.
Tom W says, I'm concerned about the tariffs. Are they really going to go into effect?
Some of them have gone into effect. And look, I applaud President Trump for what he's doing. For too long, we have ignored this. And you know as well as anyone, all of you know, the longer you ignore something, the harder it is to address it. And that's what we find ourselves in now. This has been ignored for too long. We've known there's trade imbalance. We've known that they've been taking advantage of us, and nobody wanted to address it. President Trump finally stepped in and says, no, we ain't going to do this anymore. Said, you're putting a tariff on things that we send into your country, but we're not putting one on yours. Why is that? That's not the way it should work. I will tell you this. If I wanted anyone, if I could choose any one person to negotiate on behalf of our country, it'd be Donald J. Trump. He's a master negotiator. He's going to get this worked out. He told us from the very beginning, he said, look, this is going to cause some short-term pain. And he was right. It has caused some short-term pain. But in the long term, it's going to be for the better. Now, all of a sudden, these countries are coming in saying, yeah, we better negotiate a deal with you. Yeah, you better, because he's certainly serious about this. And you're going to see more and more deals announced, and it's going to be better for Americans. It should be. Think about this. Many of you, I'm sure, have traveled to Europe before. How many American cars do you see on the roads in Europe? And how many European cars do you see on the roads here? No comparison. You hardly ever see an American car on the European road. But over here, you see all kind of European cars. So I applaud the president for what he's doing with tariffs. I know it's tough, and he told us it's going to be tough, but hang in there. We're going to make sure that this works.
David D wants to know, he says, these LA riots about ICE are ridiculous. I support ICE. Do you?
Absolutely, I support ICE. Listen, as I mentioned earlier, I've been to the border 8 times in the 10.5 years I've been in Congress, and I will tell you, those ICE agents are doing an outstanding job, and they're doing yeoman's work. Unfortunately, they're having to do more counseling now because so many people have been coming across there, which is not what they're trained for. They're trained for police work, and that's what they're supposed to be doing. But unfortunately, they've had to do more than that, and they've done an outstanding job with everything they've been doing. But I support ICE, and we have to support ICE. We are a nation of laws. And if we forget about that, then we're going to be just an anarchy, and it's just going to be chaos everywhere.
Clay D asks, are you announcing a vote for HR 25, the fair tax?
Yes. Well, I'd love to. I'd love to. I'm the sponsor of the fair tax, and I believe strongly in the fair tax. I believe we ought to do away with the IRS. Look, nobody likes to pay taxes. None of us do. But if you were given the choice between a property tax or a sales tax or a consumption tax, most people would say, I'd rather have a consumption tax. And that's what the fair tax is. It's a consumption tax. You buy something, you're going to pay a tax on it. If you don't want to pay the tax, don't buy it. I give the example because people say, oh, this is going to benefit the rich. No, it's not. If a billionaire is going to buy a yacht, I'm going to buy a John boat. That's what I'm going to buy. Now, the taxes on a yacht are a lot higher than they are on a John boat. So they're going to pay more in taxes. And that's why they call it the fair tax. And this way, you decide how much you're going to pay in taxes. Not the federal government, not some armed, unelected bureaucrat that's working with the IRS. They're not going to determine it. You're going to determine it. That's why I think the fair tax is the best thing that we could possibly do. We were very fortunate last session to get a hearing in front of the Ways and Means Committee. Now we need to take the next step. Now we need to get it out of the Ways and Means Committee. The Ways and Means Committee is the tax committee. We need to get it out of that and get it on the floor and get it voted on in the House and the Senate and get it on the president's desk.
Dorothy H wants to know, what is your position on climate change? Do you have any concern about its impact on your low country district?
Yes, I do have a concern about it. Look, I believe in climate change. I believe it's real. I believe man has an impact on it. I am not one of these who thinks that if we don't have it resolved by day after tomorrow, we're going to all fry. I don't believe that. But I do believe that we need to be responsible. Look, I represent the entire coast of Georgia. I love, I love our environment. Some of my fondest memories growing up are going fishing with my dad. My dad and I grew up in Fort Wentworth, right on the South Carolina line. We went over to Hilton Head when we went fishing. And we went to South Carolina. We went to Chichessie, Lemon Island, all that area over there. That's where we fished. And we were closer there to there than we actually were to Tybee and Ossabaw Sound. But we went to Calabogie Sound. That's where we went fishing. And those are some of my fondest memories. Of course, I want to protect the environment. And I get so aggravated when these environmentalists say, oh, Republicans don't care about the environment. That's just bull. Of course, we care about the environment, and we want to make sure the environment is protected. Yes, does that mean that we want to cut down on carbon emissions? And we are cutting down on carbon emissions. We are. And listen, the oil and gas sector has cut down on carbon emissions tremendously. Do we need to do better? Yeah, we need to do better. But do we need the government stepping in and saying you have to drive an electric vehicle? No, it's not the place of the government to do that. I just feel very strongly about that. So do I believe in climate change? Yes, I believe in it. And I believe that we have a responsibility to make sure, and we have cleaned it up so much. I don't think we get enough credit for what we've done. I don't think the oil and gas industry gets enough credit for what they've done. But at the same time, these who are crying that if we don't have this resolved by day after tomorrow, we're all going to fry. That's just ridiculous.
Sharon S. asks, what plans do you have to meet with your constituents who have been outside your office building every Wednesday for 21 weeks?
Look, I'm glad to meet with groups. I'm glad to meet with smaller groups. I'm not going to have a town hall meeting in person. We've all seen what has happened with that. People don't know how to act anymore. But if you want to get a group together and meet with me, I'm happy to meet with you anytime. Anytime. I know there've been people out there on Wednesdays, and I know that and listen, if they want to come in the office and meet with me, and a small group at a time, I'm glad to do that. And I'll be happy to do that. We'll make sure that happens. But this is just ridiculous. And you've seen what's been going on here. And the police have asked us not to do this, and we're not going to do it. It's just dangerous right now.
Tom P. wants to know, what is your recommendation for bringing more people into the Republican Party?
My recommendation for bringing more people in the Republican Party is for them to understand just what we're trying to do here. We're moving America forward. We're making America great again. If you look at President Trump's America First policies, which I support and which I'm going to support in the Senate as well, you'll see that what we're trying to do, I think, represents what Georgians want. And that is, they don't want, unlike John Ossoff, they don't want men participating in girls' sports. They do not want biological men participating in girls' sports. They do not want illegals on Medicaid. They don't want illegals on the safety net program for the most vulnerable people in our society. John Ossoff, he represents the values of AOC and Bernie Sanders more so than he does of Georgians. So I think we've got the right message in the Republican Party, and we need to continue doing what we're doing, and that is following America First policies.
We have a comment from Angie H., who says, I just want to say thank you to our first responders for their hard work to protect the people of Georgia, and that I'm praying for your family, Mr. Carter. How can people possibly politicize such a tragedy? It is disgusting.
I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you for that. And I want to thank God for my grandchildren, my granddaughters being okay. And I just want I want Janie Hunt's family to know that we're not going to forget her, and they don't want her to be forgotten. They wanted me to mention her name. I've done a number of interviews the past few days, and I've gotten permission from the family. In fact, I've gotten encouragement from the family. Janie Hunt was a 9-year-old, and she was just she was a bright, outgoing, loving, precious little girl, and as I said, now she's in heaven and God's wrapped his arms around her and is taking care of her.
Nicholas G asks, the House just passed a bill that will deport illegal immigrants with DUIs. Did you support that bill?
I
Why
did.
weren't they being deported already?
Well, I did support that bill, and I spoke in favor of that bill on the House floor. And and let me tell you one of the reasons. First of all, I think it's good legislation. But in my office in Brunswick, I met with the grandmother of a girl who was killed in a head-on accident. The girl that was killed, her granddaughter was killed along with her other grandmother in Nahunta, Georgia, in Brantley County, by an illegal who was drunk. Now, what did he get for that? He got 15 years for each one. 30 years he's going to be out. 30 years we got to pay to keep him. 30 years we got to pay to keep him in prison. That's not right. He ought to be deported and put in prison from the country that he came from. Taxpayers shouldn't have to foot that bill. And what an injustice. 15 years for each one of them. Yes, I supported that legislation. It's good legislation. It needs to be signed into law.
And we are going to take one final question. Our last question comes from Jamie P. She said, I heard you nominated Donald Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize. Why do you think he's deserving of it?
Look at what he did in Iran. The world is safer today than it was before he took action there. You know, the Biden administration, the Biden-Harris administration, they wanted to give money to Iran. Give money to Iran. Iran is the leading sponsor of terrorism in the world. Now, what President Trump did there in obliterating their nuclear arms program, the world is safer now. We cannot allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. We cannot allow that to happen. Anybody who thinks that Israel is the only target of Iran better think twice. The reason they hate Israel so much is because they're closely aligned to America. This is a country that chants death to America. President Trump deserves this. He deserves it for what he did in Iran, for what he's trying to do in Ukraine and Russia, for what he did with the Abraham Accords. No one deserves the Nobel Peace Prize more than Donald J. Trump does. They gave it to Barack Obama for making speeches. Donald Trump has taken action. He deserves this. That's why I nominated him.
Right. Thank you to everyone who asked a question. Congressman, I want to invite you to give some closing thoughts before we wrap up this webinar.
Well, again, I want to thank everyone for your thoughts and prayers for those. You know, the death toll is over 100 now. You know, we take our children to summer camp and we drop them off and we think they're going to be safe, and we're excited about all the memories that they're going to make, all the friends that they're going to make, and all the new friends and the experiences they're going to have. And then something like this happens. Let me tell you, folks, this is one of the worst things that I've ever been through, that my family's ever been through. And I will tell you, it's something I hope no grandparent or parent has to go through. No parent should ever have to bury a child. It's got to be the very worst thing that anyone can experience. And our thoughts and prayers need to be with everyone who has been involved and who's been impacted by what has happened at Camp Mystic and in Kerrville. This was a natural catastrophe. And yeah, we need to learn lessons, as we said. We need to review it. We need to learn lessons. But at the same time, I'm not sure anything could have prevented it from happening, but please continue to pray for these families. Thank you for joining us. I hope that your question got answered. If it didn't, if you'll leave your question, we'll be glad to answer it. It's an honor and a privilege to represent the First Congressional District of Georgia, and I want you to know that I truly am honored to serve in this position. Thank each and every one of you for joining us, and God bless you.
Thank you all for joining the Congressman tonight. You can connect with him on Facebook at Congressman Buddy Carter and on X or Instagram at Rep Buddy Carter. You can also sign up for his weekly newsletter by visiting buddycarter.house.gov. Please stay tuned for future events with Congressman Buddy Carter, and we hope you have a great rest of your evening.